Hello, and welcome to Picture This, a podcast from the photo archives of the Albuquerque Museum. My name is Jill Hartke, and I'm the Digital Archivist here at the museum. Today we take a look at the indomitable women of the laundry industry. In the photo archives of the Albuquerque Museum is a photograph from around 1920 showing the laundresses of Imperial Laundry wearing white uniforms and short hair, standing inside the factory beside heavy machinery. Here's the story behind the photograph. When people think of commercial laundries in America, many think of Chinese immigrants running laundry businesses in cities around the country. Chinese men who came to America in the last half of the 19th century were barred from many lines of work due to racism and discriminatory policies. They took up the laundry industry because it was not expensive to enter and cleanliness was becoming very important, especially in larger cities. But even with a lucrative business in a niche industry, it was no easy life. Chinese immigrants were targeted by the first federal immigration laws. The Page Act of 1875 targeted Chinese women, and the Chinese Exclusion Act of 1882 barred Chinese men from settling in the United States. Even those Chinese immigrants who had migrated before the laws were passed were at risk of being banned from re-entry if they left the United States for any reason. These federal laws had a profound impact on Albuquerque's demographic. Newtown Albuquerque was being built around the same time the laws were passed, and only a few Chinese families made their home in early Newtown. In the late 1890s, there were several hand laundry businesses run by Chinese men, mostly centered near 2nd and 3rd Streets and Gold and Silver Avenues, the heart of the Chinese community in town. The Lee family and the Singh family lived and worked along 2nd Street and Silver Avenue, running their laundry businesses and trying to put roots into the Newtown Albuquerque ground. But racism and anti-Asian sentiment was pervasive, making economic success difficult. In the first decade of the 20th century, white men began opening steam laundries in the neighborhood, which put an end to the small community of Chinese immigrants. By World War I, the laundry industry in Albuquerque included just one Chinese laundry business, now located on West Central Avenue. The area of 2nd Street and Silver Avenue was now dominated by Imperial Laundry, run by a man named E.R. Edgar. Excelsior Laundry and Albuquerque Wet Wash Laundry joined Imperial as the three largest laundries in town. Women, mainly Mexican-American women, made up most of the workforce. Some men worked in the laundries, but most men worked as delivery drivers. The three steam laundries served hotels, restaurants, and families who could afford to pay the cost. The work was hard, the hours were long, and the pay was very low, with some women making just $3.50 a week. The industry was hard hit in the supply shortages of World War I, and the wages paid to the laundry workers remained the same for years. Around the country, laws meant to provide overtime pay were skirted. Some laundries asked workers to arrive early in the morning, work hard for several hours, clock out, and then at a moment's notice ask them to clock back in and work for several more hours. The schedule was spontaneous, based on demand of laundry each day. This practice meant that a woman might be at work for 12 hours a day, but the bosses only paid them for 8 or 9. When World War I ended, supplies became easier to come by. Workers saw their chance at demanding better wages and fairer treatment, and they grabbed it. In 1919, led by the women of Imperial, Excelsior, and Wet Wash Laundries, an Albuquerque Laundry Workers Union was born. In April, they asked their bosses to recognize the union, raise wages for all positions, and stick to a 48-hour work week. At an evening meeting on April 14th, the union got word that their request was rejected. There were more than 125 laundry workers, and the following morning, 75% of the workforce walked out. The Central Labor Union supported the workers and acted as their voice during the strike. The laundry workers knew that they needed to do more than just walk out. They needed to create an economic impact on the local laundry industry. They decided that the best way to affect the larger laundries was by stealing their clients. so they began advertising for their own laundry. The union laundry workers were clever, and they didn't need to worry about intimidating any strikebreakers. They simply hired them. 20 extra laundresses from the city were brought onto the union's payroll to do laundry at their homes. A drop-off and delivery point was set up in the Central Labor Union's office at 207 Gold Avenue. The union paid $7 a week. The laundry workers didn't need to picket to make it clear that they meant business, and they were willing to stay on strike as long as it took to change the industry in Albuquerque. As the days went by, the strike was most evident in the newspaper. A press war was waged between the union and the laundry bosses, each side hoping to gain business, or at least sympathy. 2 days into the strike, the laundry bosses agreed to higher wages, hoping that would be enough to end the strike. But it wasn't. The union stayed out, and the laundry workers managed their laundry business with very few issues out of the union's office. Imperial Laundry, the largest enterprise in town, became desperate, taking out want ads crying out for girls to show up and work. But the strikebreakers who might have answered the ads were already hired by the union and were helping with the laundry work. The steam laundries began to close, while the union laundry did a brisk business, even sending laundry orders to Denver to be handled by a union representative there. After 10 days, the strike officially ended on April 25th, when the bosses accepted every demand of the laundry workers. The workers closed up the union laundry and returned to the steam laundries, now working only 8 hours a day at higher wages under their union contracts. The laundresses had triumphed. Their success in Albuquerque galvanized the region. 6 months after the successful strike in Albuquerque, laundry workers in El Paso attempted to unionize, and when it was not recognized by their bosses, they followed the model of the Albuquerque workers and went on strike. Ultimately, the El Paso laundresses were unsuccessful in gaining recognition of their union in 1919. Still, the events in Albuquerque and El Paso helped to center the efforts of women, especially Mexican-American women, in the early labor struggles of the Southwest. It would be another decade before the labor movement gained true momentum in the United States, but the roots of those later campaigns can be traced back to earlier victories, like the rights won by the bold women and men of Albuquerque's laundries. Thank you for joining us for Picture This with the Albuquerque Museum. Please join us next time for the story behind another photograph in the museum's collection.